So today we're exploring the topic. So it's number 7, session 7 in our Experiencing No Self series, and we're exploring what I'm calling resting as awareness. And it may sound like a kind of very simple topic, but it's far from that. And you hear meditations, and I've said it many thousands of times. Resting in awareness, and just rest in awareness, or rest as awareness, as a meditation practice. You often hear it, or you might hear it, resting in a being mode, or just being, non-doing. It's kind of resting as awareness. So what is that for you? What is that pointing to? When you hear the term resting as awareness, what's that pointing to for you? Yeah.
For me, oh my goodness. Normally, we meditate on an object of meditation. Resting in awareness for me is taking that away, not giving a point of reference to the mind, which at the Shambhala Center was presented, yes, as the most advanced way of meditation. Just following what is out there, even sounds, whatever, but always returning to, not giving a point of reference. That's probably the best way I can express it, and that's when it happens, because of course my mind has its own things, but when it happens, I get the sense of openness. That's the best way I can describe it. I know that's not the object, but it's very satisfying. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah. So you say it's kind of like taking away the point of reference, right? It's because we're not meditating on objects. So we're not saying the breath or the body sensations or thoughts or sounds, or it's taking all those reference points away and saying, just bring your attention to that kind of the context within which all that's happening, within which all those objects are arising. So I use silence in the guided meditations as kind of a pointer to that context. Yeah, thank you. Anybody else? What's resting as awareness? When you hear that, what's that mean to you in terms of a meditation instruction? Yeah,
I would say for me, my experience with resting in awareness is that the awareness is something that it's different from everything else. It's something that doesn't change when you come back to it. It's when you're in those still moments and you're able to come back, rest in awareness. It's awareness, and it encompasses everything. It's always there. Yeah, that's for me. I mean, I also have this similar experiences as you were mentioning before, but with that openness. But I also, it's this unchanging kind of quality that, other things that other objects of meditation, they could change from time to time, kind of thing. The awareness, you'll always come back to it. It's always there. It's kind of reassuring, actually.
Okay. So like silence is always there. It's not something you have to create. It's not something that's created. It's not something that's therefore impermanent. Like, so anything you create, anything that is birthed by definition is impermanent and dies. Thoughts, sensations, and so forth. They arise and then they pass. So yeah, so it's not something you create. So I'll say a little bit as well, sort of what is it when we're resting as awareness, and I like to say as awareness because it's kind of, it points to kind of what we are. We're bringing attention to the backdrop and of all the objects and noise that comprise our experience. Right, so we have all this experience, all these I call them objects, thoughts, body sensations, emotions, all this stuff's arising, right? And the egoic mind's struggling with all all these what's arising. It's liking some of them and wanting more of some of it, and not liking others. It's kind of this, wanting, not wanting kind of mode. And so there's all this kind of, that's the activity of the egoic mind, and you can almost call that like noise. it's just all this or movement, right? And there's nothing wrong, it's not bad, but it's just a lot of this movement. But behind all that is this kind of still silent beingness, you could say, that within which all that occurs. And what tends to happen is we're so engrossed or enthralled, or the Buddha used the word, what gets translated as enchanted. I love that. We're enchanted with all the objects and all the noise and what the egoic mind's involved with, that we don't even notice the context, that still silent, aware spirit, you could call it, presence that's behind it all. So this is just simply just a kind of gentle turning of our attention towards that background. So as we've been practicing with no self, we've started to see that we're not our egoic self, or not these thoughts. I mean, this isn't our true nature. These are arising in a kind of relative sense. It's in our experience, but it's not our true nature. So what we're now trying to point to is, well, what is it? What is our true nature? How can we touch into that? How can we touch into that other dimension, that ultimate reality that we talked about? So we're not discounting one and saying one's better, but how can we turn our attention so that we can touch into that other dimension, which is our true nature. This kind of silent awareness. There's been all kinds of metaphors that have been used. There's the screen in a movie. So when you watch a movie, right, you're enchanted with all the objects on the screen, right? And so you don't notice the screen that it's being projected on, right? Because the objects have taken your attention, but without the screen, there would be no objects. So they say the screen is kind of like, ultimate reality. It's the background within which all the objects appear. I kind of like that metaphor. It kind of gives you can kind of take that metaphor and kind of play around with it. The screen's not affected by whatever's projected on it, right? You can project a horror movie on the screen or a love story on the screen. The screen's still remains the screen, the same. It's unaffected by what is projected on it. So similarly, the way that our true nature our ultimate reality is unaffected by what arises and passes through it. An ocean, is another a metaphor that's used for this kind of dimension. So the waves may appear. Sometimes your thoughts are the waves that are appearing on the ocean. We can be identified with the waves, not even realize that there's a whole ocean underneath those waves. And the currents can be emotions, right? And we can be identified with the currents and the waves and not realize that they're just arisings of a larger ocean. And in many ways, sometimes when we're on this spiritual quest, we can be a wave searching for water, right? The wave not realizing that it is water, and it spends all this time searching for, well, what's my true nature? It's just searching for water, and not until it's kind of stops and kind of just is still for a moment, they can see, I am this for which I've been searching. And this is all part of this ocean. And these waves and currents are just arising within this larger context of the ocean, which is actually my true nature. So that's another metaphor that really kind of resonates with me. Ramana Maharshi calls it abiding in the self. He's pointing to the same thing, although he's using the word self in a different way. If you look at the way self is used in the Indian context, it's true self is talked about as being your true nature. So it's not self in the way that we're using it as a no self. So he was talking about the same thing, this abiding in this context of within which all objects are arising. And one way you can talk about it is bringing attention to the silence. So I've been playing around with that for the last 2 weeks. Excuse me. Just in moments, noticing just kind of whenever it arises for me to just draw my attention away from the objects to the silence. And in fact, I was starting to notice it when there'd be a lot of objects. So the ego is actually really engaged, right? Like a political debate will really engage the ego, with the election and all that being on political ideas really engage the ego, because the ego has so many opinions about everything, right? So I notice those moments when the ego is just like, I go, okay, now the ego is really, really busy right now. Can I drop below this into the silence that exists below all this noise? And when you do that, you'll feel a visceral shift in your body. Like even just do it right now, like just shift from all these words that are kind of coming out of my mouth. And now, so your thoughts are being activated, your mind's activated. Kind of shift below all that to the silence within which all that's occurring. And there's kind of I feel my shoulders just kind of relax, my shoulders release. I can just kind of feel this sense of ease that exists within all that. And that's always there. You can bring your attention to that anytime. And that's really it's really coming into awareness of another dimension, the silence that's between all the noise. I mean, we're so conditioned to bring attention to noise, to the egoic activity. So this is just turning the tendency to bring attention towards silence instead of noise. So I'm calling all this egoic activity noise, just to kind of contrast it to silence. And you can attune to the silence in, in your environment, between all the sounds that you hear in your environment, that silence, or it can be a kind of in between all the internal noise, the thoughts. Ultimately, we're we're abiding in this interior silence. And it's not just the absence of noise. The noise can still be there. It's the backdrop within which all the noise happens. And so you don't have to get rid of all the noise, like the objects arising and passing. You don't have to get rid of that. That can still happen. But you can just tune into or draw your attention to the silence within which all that activity or noise occurs. It's a beautiful, beautiful practice. Just kind of drop into that that silence. So here, I'll give you an example of how we're conditioned. For example, look around the room you're in and notice what you see. What do you see? You probably see tables, chairs, maybe artwork, doors, shelves, clothes, whatever it might be. Is that pretty, people are seeing those kinds of things. Do you notice the space? The biggest thing in your room is space. The biggest thing in the room you're in is space. Did you notice the space within which all the objects are occurring? Right? Just the space. So we're so conditioned to be focused on objects. I'm just kind of using this as a pointer. And it's the same in our interior experience. So I'm using an exterior experience. It's similar in our interior experience. We're so focused on thoughts, emotions, body sensations. I want, I like, I dislike, all these feeling, tone, perception, and so on, that we miss the silence, or the space within which all that happens. The same way we miss the space in which all those objects in the room you're in arise in. So you can think of this as just kind of the background within which all experience happens. And so you just kind of realize that there it is. Whether you're thinking or you're not thinking, feeling or not feeling, that silence, or that aware space is always there, regardless of how busy the egoic mind is or how still the egoic mind is. That space is the same. It's the screen, it's always there, it's always the same, it's not changed by whatever's arising. So we're simply directing attention. It's just a directing, kind of directing attention towards this. Ajahn Chah, the Thai forest master who I've referred to often in this group, is I've some of my favorite quotes come from him. He often liked to invite practitioners to direct attention to sounds. I don't know if any of you go to with Ajahn Veridamo and the Ottawa Buddhist Society. He's a very good teacher with that group, and he often meditates on sounds as well. And he comes from the lineage of Ajahn Chah and Ajahn Sumedho, and drawing attention to the silence between the sounds. It's kind of how we started the guided meditation. So it's pointing you know, first kind of seeing that in the external world, you know, the silence between the sounds out there, and then bringing that interior, because the ultimately the practice is to seeing that as an interior experience, the silence that exists. So we start to noticing the silence between the words and the thoughts internally, seeing that silent, that kind of silent space between the thoughts or the words. Perhaps you've heard, you know, the statement, attending to the wordless. You kind of hear that, and you know, you might have heard that before. And the first time I heard it, I thought, well, what the heck does that mean? Like tending to the wordless. I didn't make. What it's pointing to is that space between the words. Right, that's where they're the wordless. It's a kind of wordless, bringing attention to something that is within experience, that is always there. Right? It's unborn, it's uncreated, it's just always there. So we're in this process, we're discovering there's a difference between what we're conscious of, like all the objects, and consciousness itself. Right? We're drawing that distinction. We're bringing attention now to consciousness itself, that backdrop. And a key part of this is recognizing that this is not created. It's not something we create. We create noise, right? We're really good at that. We create thoughts and emotions and dislikes and likes, and the egoic mind's great at creating all this. I'll just call it noise, just to contrast it to silence. We're great at creating that. Awareness is always there. It's not something we create. It's not something we lose. We lose sight of it, but it doesn't go away. It's always there. It just may not be something that we're bringing our attention to. And partly it's just always there. It's kind of, we just don't pay attention to it. I don't know if it's like if you put a piece of art on your wall, first time you put it on the wall, you look at it, and, oh, it's beautiful. And you might look at it quite a bit, right? First couple of weeks, wow, that's a beautiful piece of art. That's amazing. That's why you obviously really liked it if you put it on your wall, and you just savor the beauty of this piece work of art. After maybe a month, you might look at it every 3 or 4 days, and then a year goes by, you may never even notice it's there, right? It's just part of the wall now, right? It's the novelty. And I find consciousness is it's just always there. Like, what's exciting about it, right? All these objects are kind of, you know, they're always shifting and changing. It's a lot of noise, and we get enchanted with that. So part of this process is recognizing, oh, like bringing attention to something else, some other aspect of your experience can really be powerful and transformative. So it's not, so there's kind of two parts, like the Buddha talked about, you know, becoming kind of disenchanted with the egoic mind, seeing that it's actually great, it's where suffering is created, but it's also seeing the transformative power of drawing your attention to this other aspect of our being, this actually true nature aspect of our being, and kind of turning our gaze towards this. And so it's kind of a shifting attention or turning our gaze, and then it's also kind of feeling into, okay, what's it feel like when I do that? Viscerally feel like when I do that. Feel it in the body. What's it feel like in your body? So you're not just kind of turning, it's not just your attention turning, but you're bringing your whole body along for the experience, you could say, right? You're bringing your whole being along for the experience. So it's tuning into something different. You all know what noise feels like, right? We all know that. That's where we, I think, most human beings, that's where they dwell. They dwell in the noise. So this is just an invitation to intentionally dwell in the silence, what I'm calling the silence. And you'll notice when you do this, it immediately changes your experience of the moment. It immediately changes your experience of the moment. Just play with that. I mean, again, you're the authority, so you have to do it in your own experience and see it for yourself. In your own experience, just play around with this over the next week. Just draw, and particularly when the ego is really noisy, because then the contrast is big, right? You can just be. I've had lots of opportunities. I've got all these guests, right? So there's lots of egoic, noisy opportunities. And so then it's just drop into, bring your attention into that other aspect of being, bring the body along with it, sense into it, and just feel it deeply. And just do that. That's really a key part of this practice, is just rest as that silence, rest as that awareness, that rest as that ultimate nature of your being. You might find your shoulders relax a bit. You might find you get a deeper sense of the experience that you're actually having, a deeper sense of it, a way of being with it in a different way. You might notice that, wow, that silent awareness is always there. I don't have to do anything. My gosh, enlightenment is right there. It's like I just have to bring my attention to it. Because what is enlightenment except knowing your true nature? And there it is. Silent, still awareness. It's always already present. You don't have to sign up for retreats for the next year, read 5 more Dharma books, come to Thursday night group for 2 more years. It's right there. It's just simply turning your attention to it and recognizing it. And it has a tremendously transformative effect. If there's a recognition of it, if it goes unrecognized and is unconscious, there's no, if you never look at the piece of art on the wall, it has no effect, right? It's just kind of part of it's unseen, it's unrecognized. So this recognition is very powerful, to notice it or cognize it, as the Tibetans like to say. So it's happening, whether you understand it or not, whether you like it or not, it's happening. So we're just simply tuning our attention towards it. In my practice, I spent many years trying to be aware, right? I try real hard to be aware. I would be aware of this and I'd be aware of that. Spend a lot of time being aware of objects, breath, body, thoughts, and so on. And I realize I'm kind of doing a lot of things with awareness. I'm always doing something. And one day I noticed that, wow, awareness is always there. I don't really have to do anything. It's already there. It's there before I do anything. right? And it kind of shifted my practice. I didn't need to do all these things to be more aware, when I simply recognized that awareness was already there. Didn't need to do anything. And I noticed that a lot of my efforts to cultivate it made it appear to be kind of really complex and difficult. I don't know if you've had that experience, oh, this seems really complicated and really difficult. It's kind of, always trying to cultivate this, but it's always there. It's kind of like, I can't remember the name of the teacher. Perhaps some of you, when I bring it up, it's kind of like having diamonds in your pockets and going around trying to create wealth. You're doing all these things trying to be wealthy, and all along you have diamonds in your pockets. And if you're convinced that you're poor and you have to kind of create wealth in order to have wealth, then you'll never put your hands in your pockets. So if you're convinced that awareness is something that must be created or cultivated, then you're going to miss the recognition that awareness is already there. Right? If you're always doing, cultivating, doing, I got to do this, I got to do that. When awareness is just, it's there. It's the diamonds in your pockets are there. We just have to recognize it. Just recognize it. It's turning of attention. Turning of attention. So it's not, and I could spend a lot of time in talking about how it's not something you do. Right. It's probably one of the most common questions that spiritual teachers, Dharma teachers get asked is, how do I do it? Right. How do I rest as awareness? Well, there's no how, there's no I, there's no do. So if you take all those out, you just rest, just recognize that awareness is there. You can't do resting as awareness. Awareness is already present. It's not something you create. So one of the, going back to my story, one of the things that helped the most was to surrender the doer, because that's really the ego mind getting involved, right? I got to do something. The ego mind wants to get it right, wants to understand it, wants to know how to do it. How do I do this, or how do I do that? This is the activity of the ego mind, and it's fine. You can you can see all that, but the resting as awareness is dropping below all that and recognizing that silent stillness, that quiet that exists behind all that noise. So you're relinquishing the doer, which is the egoic mind. So it's that letting be or letting go, letting everything be as it is right now. So, and most people's egoic minds won't let many things be for very long, right? Have you noticed that? The egoic mind just won't let things be for very long. It wants to understand, wants to do it right, and so forth. So it's kind of relinquishing that. So we started with the no self teachings about transcending the egoic mind, transcending the ego, or seeing the truth of the ego and the ego falling away. So either one, whether it falls away or whether you've transcended it, so you see that it's not your true self, right? It's not your true nature. And so that's why it's very important, that practice, because it allows us to relinquish this egoic doing, compulsive or almost neurotic compulsion to understand and to do. So transcending that is a very important part of this practice. And there's a time for understanding, there's a time for doing, but in terms of resting as awareness, these are the first two things that we let go of. It doesn't mean you never do anything, or the ego is going to continue, the relative world continues, and oh, that's wonderful, and it's part of our humanness, right? What we're doing here is we're connecting in with our beingness. And to do that, we relinquish that aspect, so there can be a resting. That's why the word resting is kind of resting, relinquishing the doer, the neurotic need to understand. And the egoic mind wants nothing to do with this. You've probably noticed that. And the egoic mind will jump in with all kinds of noise. Wants nothing to do with this resting as awareness, except perhaps if the egoic mind can latch onto it as kind of an improvement project for the ego. Like, I want to become an enlightened ego. Right? Have you noticed how the ego, perhaps you're at that stage where the ego is like, oh, I can get it. I'll be enlightened. And then when I walk down the street, people will notice, that's an enlightened person. They've got an aura or something, or and the ego can really get it. The ego can get a real head trip on this. The idea of an enlightened ego. Whoa, it doesn't get any better for the ego. So you kind of notice when that happens. But generally, other than that, the ego wants nothing to do with resting in awareness, unless it can take it on as an ego project. But so you might find as soon as you start to rest as awareness, even for a few moments, the ego reacts. I really like, maybe we'll do a session on this, Mara in the Buddha's texts. If you've come across Mara comes up all over the place. It comes up in the Buddha's enlightenment when he's sitting under the Bodhi tree, and Mara's kind of a tempter, a seductor. Oh, you shouldn't do that. What about this? And it keeps tempting the Buddha with all, desires and fears and all. And of course, and what makes you think you're good enough to be enlightened? And that's when he touches the earth, which of course is just pointing to, there is no me. I'm just nature. Touching the earth, it's just nature. But so Mara might arise as you try to rest as awareness, right? Is the egoic mind appearing as this kind of tempter. If you just understand one more thing, we'd read one more book, it would be so much easier for you to rest as awareness. So notice when the Mara, the tempter, comes in, just think about this one more thing. It'll be easier to rest as awareness properly. So noticing when Mara arises, and Mara is a very frequent visitor for all meditators and any practitioner wanting to rest as awareness and touch into that silent place. And what did the Buddha say? Under the Bodhi tree, I see you, Mara. Later, he said, I know you, Mara. There you are. That's it. Once you're seen, and you can just kind of loses It's juice. The should and shouldn'ts are gone. You know, I should do this, I shouldn't do that. It's gone. You're not caught in that egoic state of mind. You can rest as awareness. In the moment, in that moment, you're resting as awareness when you're not caught in the egoic mind state. And you just do this one thing consistently. And when I say consistently, I don't mean you have to sustain it for long, long periods of time either. Just consistently drop into that space. It's very transformative. I noticed it particularly today with all the action, and I just kept dropping. We went on a hike, there was 7 of us, dropping into the stillness. And that word consistently kind of arose. It wasn't like I wasn't really even dwelling there. I was just kind of consistently turning my gaze, turning my attention towards that aspect of being, that beingness. To doing it consistently, not being lured into the mind that wants to figure everything out, wants to do it right. Very simple, right? Very simple. The mind likes complex stuff. Have you noticed that? The mind loves complexity. The mind loves this, you know, if I sat here and gave you a really esoteric lecture on well, kind of the ultimate reality talk was the mind loves, that's like mind candy, right? Oh yeah, it's a lot of ideas and concepts. The mind loves that. But this is instead, it's very simple. So you don't need to make it, it's not complex at all. It's really very, very simple. It's the teaching and it's the method. Just rest as awareness. The silent, still, whatever word works, Buddha nature, spirit, divine. I mean, they're all just words. Doesn't really matter which word you use, but it's just getting the sense of that just resting as that. And there's nothing for the egoic mind to do in that resting. So the egoic mind gets a little antsy. Have you noticed that when you do it, the egoic mind, I don't know, a little unsettling. You can almost feel the egoic mind quivering, gets unsettled, and yeah, that's fine too. Noticing that that's happening. So at some point, as you rest in awareness, rest as awareness, rest in that space, quiet space between thoughts, the quiet space between all the noise, it may dawn on you that that you and awareness are not two separate things. That you're not somebody resting as awareness. The idea the idea of you, of a self, is just a concept. So we'll talk a little more next week about that aspect. But at this point, I'd just like you to play around with that simple practice of turning your gaze towards that very simple aspect of your being, kind of consistently, as many times as it arises. And it will arise. Just hearing this talk, of course, shifts what happens next, right? In your life. It'll shift, because what will happen is that it'll arise. And the more, so tomorrow or tonight even, and it would arise a few times, and you shift your gaze, and it'll arise a few more times. Oh, I'll shift my gaze towards this other aspect of, to your beingness, your true nature. And don't make it's not complicated. You don't need to read a whole bunch of books about it, right? The mind will go, well, what's the difference between consciousness with a small c and consciousness with a big C, and awareness and mindfulness? And like, I got to figure all that out before I can turn my gaze towards it. Like, right? The mind will do that. Maybe that's what it'll do when you leave this talk. It's just the mind wanting to make it complicated, and just understand this one more thing, and then you can do it. You'll do it better and properly if you just figure this out. So just relinquish all that and just go back to the simple practice, very simple practice. It took me decades to figure this out, so I'm sharing with you kind of a shortcut. You can, save a lot of money buying books too. I've got, 10 books on consciousness versus awareness. So, I don't even know what to do with them at this point, but, so yeah, just go to that simple, very simple practice. So I'll open it up. I'm sorry, I've talked for a long time, but this is kind of a, I sent out the email, and maybe I didn't make it enticing enough because we have fewer numbers, but it's really kind of the key turning point. And I'd almost like to send out another email saying, if you missed this one, really listen to it, because from here we really build on what this means in terms of transcending self. So we've been talking about transcending ego. Now we're really, and letting ego falling away. Now we're really talking about transcending self and self falling away. That's why I made the distinction. I'll talk more about that next week. I'll really go into what that means, and how we can manifest that directly in our practice. So yeah, what's on your mind, folks?
I'm not muted, am I?
No.
A comment and a question, I guess. In that practice, I'm thinking about, well, I think Jack Cornfield calls it the one that knows, or who knows, awareness. But when I think about that practice, I think about terms like dropping, like you mentioned, opening, no concepts. I think about opening all of the sense force, and if I may, all of the brain cells, make them all available to look at the envelope rather than what's inside the envelope. I think about a canvas where, say, normally I hear a bird, but I don't actually hear it. It's there. But I don't hear it. There's a breeze, and I don't hear it or feel it. In this practice, I think that I try to be aware, to be open to all of those. I actually hear the bird. I do hear and feel the breeze, but again, without lingering, of course. It's almost like on a canvas, like a drop of paint that goes on the canvas and then dissipates. It falls out. Then another drop, but the canvas is the object. Is what is that awareness? At least in my intention when I try to do that, to meditate that way. Now the question is about Mara that you mentioned before, and the projects that the ego may build out of this. Oh, I'm a really good meditator. Look, I can rest in awareness. And what comes to mind is I'm hoping that there is a difference. I know that ego is the big enemy. The difference between an egoic project and a little bit of enjoyment. Earlier I mentioned, it feels satisfying, but I realized that if it then becomes an egoic project, that's not good either. So what comes to mind is Surya Das that says, enjoy your meditation. Just that word, enjoyment. So I'm hoping that middle point, that enjoyment is okay, but watch out that it's not the ego that's beginning to build on this, make a story, make a project. And so I'd like to hear your view of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so resting as awareness, you'll feel the sense of enjoyment and ease as soon as you touch into it, right? It's a very easeful, peaceful resting. That's, I think, why the word resting is used. You can also use the word dwelling. But I like the word resting. Is this kind of yeah, and that we're just touching into that other aspect of being. It doesn't mean we don't also enjoy the relative world, right? We still create things and enjoy the creations that occur in the relative world, but we tend to be enchanted with that aspect. So the idea is, we're not rejecting the mind's, amazing ability to create beautiful things, and also to create a fair bit of destruction, as we've seen in the world. But we're enjoying those creative aspects of our relative existence, and the egoic mind's participation in that. Of course, it's just arising and passing away, right? It's not truly who we are at the deepest level, but we can still enjoy it. But we're also touching into this other dimension of being, which really is another dimension of being that has gone unnoticed, and we're simply drawing our attention, recognizing it in a consistent way. I hope that's answering your question.
Yes.
Thank you.
Stephen, ever since the question is being asked, what is our true nature? I'm still struggling with what that question means, what the answer is, and whether it matters at all. And just some other context in terms of where I'm at in this process. I'm finding the discussion this evening absolutely wonderful, very insightful. Over a long period of time, you've been emphasizing that we really don't have any control over anything. And I think some of that started for me with discussions of free will. Do we have it? And I resisted that a lot earlier on. And I'm sort of coming to grips with it. Thoughts are just arising, emotions are just arising, just causes and conditions. And I'm finding all of that very reassuring. It helps bring a sense of peace that I'm not responsible. There's no reason to have regrets for things that happened in the past. That happened. It wasn't me in control of it. So it takes a big weight off. And when you talked about tonight awareness, it was the same sort of emphasis that we don't have to do anything. It's just there. And one of the things with just being in awareness is it's the one thing that's constant, but we can't control whether it's there or not. All the other stuff, the objects there don't really matter. They're just coming and going, and we're not really in control. So I'm finding all that helpful. But then you move to the next level. Okay, I'm in awareness. What is that? It could be just something that's being a physical creation by the body that's just temporary here. It could be and we've talked about consciousness before, it could be something that's broader, that continues after death. We have no way of knowing. And so there's a certain mystery there. It seems to me that there's an unknowing, and there's no way of figuring that out. And I'm kind of thinking that there's some peace that comes from, well, just accepting awareness is there, and don't really know what it is. But then I'm trying to figure out where the question fits into that. What is our true nature? Because I'm not sure that it's even an answerable question. But anyways, any thoughts you have in that, I'd be interested in.
Mm. 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 It's a beautiful, so many words there that resonate, like mystery. It's mysterious. It's unknowing. I love the way you put unknowing, unknowable. It's unknowing. It's not just unknown. And just resting in that. That's the don't know mind, the beginner's mind that we've spoken so much about. We bring to this practice. So that's it. There's, so what true nature is a word that, these are all words: true nature, Buddha nature, spirit, Christ head. Any other words out there people know of that point to, right? There's all, they're concepts pointing towards something that's not conceptual, not dualistic, right? It's non-dual. So as soon as you put a word on it, of course, you can come up with another word. Well, if it's this, then it's not that, but it's mysterious, it's unknowing, is really the way to engage with it. And that allows you to kind of relinquish the mind that needs to understand or needs to do it right. And just keep it simple. Just tuning into when we tune into the quiet space. It's another kind of term that arose for me, is other than just the quiet space, the silence. So that's the portal, the gate, right? And you don't need a key for the gate, and there's really no gate there, but you kind of talk about it that way. That's the way to touch into it. Then I will talk more about that aspect, and also I'm going to talk more about the falling away of personal will, what that means in the practice. And another aspect that you brought up was how this actual falling away of the personal will is really kind of the fundamental struggle for the ego. So we talk about that fear arises, right? And I've brought this up, that what's been happening in my practice. Well, the fear, and this kind of actually came to me in the last little while, is the fear is actually the ego's sense of powerlessness. Right? It's not really a fear of death so much as it's a fear of powerlessness the ego has. It's like, and so that's really this kind of falling away of the personal will, which is a little different than we sometimes think of there's no free will, which is a little different than saying there's a falling away of the personal will, because of course the operating from the perspective of the ultimate, there can be a very strong sense of will, of authority. Like the Buddha, it wasn't just, he didn't just didn't just do nothing. And all kinds of motivations, and he did things. Same with, I mean, you look at Christ as well. There was a lot of, I mean, threw tables over and, you know, that guy even got angry. I mean, there's all kinds of, of will that emerged, but it wasn't a personal will. I think that's important too, that we, doesn't mean we become, I don't know what the word would be, just kind of comatose or just kind of lay around. And in fact, it's quite the opposite. There's just, yeah. Anyway, I'll talk about that as well. And it's kind of percolating as right now is just kind of places we could continue to explore. Next week, I'd like to talk about self. Awareness is not self. Right, so the self can identify with ego. We've seen that's how most of the world, I guess, lives, as a self that's identified with ego. But the self can also identify with awareness, and how that can become a place of identity for the self. So the self is also not awareness. So I'm going to talk about that. And then when I just say it to you, it might be confusing. So just kind of put it away, but I'll send out an email, maybe entice people's interest in the topic. And then we'll explore it next week. So we're starting to get into the transcending self and transcending and self falling away in the next several sessions. Yeah. How's that sound? It's such a joy to be with you guys, you know, and don't, you know, I know I've got guests, but I would never miss this for the world. It's just taking this time to be with you folks is so wonderful. Just to see your commitment to the practice, your engagement. Yeah, warms my heart. So be well, everyone. And I'm going to run now and say hi to everybody.
Good night, everyone.
Take care. We'll see you next week.
Right, everyone.
Thank you,
Thanks so
Stephen.
much.
Good
Thank
night,
you, everyone.
everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Bye.
Stephen.
Bye, thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Hi, everyone.
Take care. So I am going to run off, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to keep you because we've got a lot of people there, but I will say that that was great. That was really, I don't know, maybe you got the sense that a lot of us were like coming along with you there, but
Yeah.
it was good. It really, to me, I just heard that, I don't know, to me, it does seem very simple. When Alan went on and on and on about, not that he went on and on, but he was trying to bring all these concepts in. And to me, it does seem very simple.
Mm-hmm.
When we're peaceful and we're sitting, everything falls away and there's just peace.
Mm-hmm.
And I never really think about what that is. You know, Alan was saying, well, what is that? I don't see the need even to know. I know you'll talk next week about you know, ourself isn't in awareness or but to me there's no awareness when you're just being, when there's just peace.
Mm. Yeah, peace is the word, good, nice word as well. Yeah,
For me, that's
you know, kind of like silence. It's stillness, peace. Yeah,
everything's strong.
yeah. So that's the practice. Just turning our attention towards that, and rather than all the objects.
Yeah. To me, that's why I go there, as it's when it's letting everything drop away and we do get peace, or I get peace.
Yeah, and you get peaceful at the same time. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Take care. We'll
You
see you next
enjoy.
week. Yeah.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.